Can I get started? Yeah. So this is the first time I'm presenting this work. So I really don't have a sense of how long the presentation is. I finished it last night. But I hope people here find it interesting. I want to say right at the start that my training at IGID, I chose IGID because I had a background in physics and I wanted to do economics. I chose it because I wanted to do interdisciplinary work. I then went to Carnegie Mellon because I wanted to do interdisciplinary work. And then I did a postdoc, which was also in computational social sciences. And I continue to do basically work that straddles economics, econometrics, machine learning, and increasingly I'm also looking at qualitative methods. So I'm kind of trying to bridge the gap between qualitative ethnographic data and quantitative techniques that can be used to analyzing. I think that's where one of the places that machine learning can really help. So just at the outset, I want to say that this talk is not a pure econ talk. It's more of a computational social science. I think I would club it more as a computational social science talk. But you'll get a sense and a flavor of it as soon as I jump in. So I'm going to just jump in. It's called In Her Shoes, Gendered Labeling in Crowdsourced Safety Ratings. It's a bit of a mouthful. So I thought maybe I'll just contextualize it in the beginning. When you see In Her Shoes and gendered labeling, as soon as you see that I am interested in questions of differential outcomes and potentially policy effects for different genders. And I'm concerned about the data that is generated, for instance, constantly on our mobile phone applications, like all the data that's just being generated throughout. And I take a specific example of that. I will motivate it in the next couple of slides, and then I basically put it through the ringer and see whether there are gender effects. Okay. So sorry, this is not working, so I'll just use the keyboard. Okay, no hand up. Yeah, this is fine. So one of the things, I don't know how many of you have noticed, this is something that I am very interested in. There's recently been a proliferation of women's safety apps, okay, on mobile phones. So two examples in India, specifically in India, are Safety Pin and Safe City, but these are just two examples. Safe City was started in Bombay, Safety Pin in Gurgaon. All of this actually started after the Nirbhaya incident. A lot of the questions around are women safe in the streets, and how do we get how do you measure safety? And so one of the things that people thought is that we've got mobile applications, why don't we crowdsource safety numbers? Now this is what is the purpose of these apps? So first of all, they help to generate what are known as safety maps, right? I'm going to show you some images in the next couple of slides. And these are not just because they are actually feeding into urban policy maker decisions for urban design. In fact, certain cities in Europe actually are looking at feminist urban design, and they sometimes use some of these kind of safety maps. Okay, they are also being used by academics for studying gendered mobility patterns. I'm going to bring up one of the most influential papers in this domain shortly. Okay, so this crowdsourced safety data is being generated, targeted towards women's safety, and then that's actually feeding into the system, both in terms of academics doing work to understand mobility patterns and policymakers actually designing policies around it. And this is, of course, not just in India. Crowdsourced safety ratings have been growing in popularity all over the world. So I'm just giving you some examples of international mobile phone applications. Like there's an application called Safe and the City, Hollaback. These are for reporting street harassment. There's, on the other hand, police brutality, right? General neighborhood safety. There's an app called Citizen. So these are kind of mobile phone applications that are collecting data to see how safe do you feel, right? And then these data sets internationally are being used to train machine learning models at scale, right? So you collect data from a few neighborhoods and then you actually generate models for the predictive scores for the entire neighborhood. So it could be, so this is by, I think, Ed Glazer, done some work on measuring the physical evaluation of neighborhoods, estimating levels of gentrification of neighborhoods. So the whole point of this slide is saying that this is not some esoteric kind of data set or kind of data. This is actually being utilized. And so to show you some, yeah, and of course, creating large-scale maps of urban safety. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples, right? So this is how it started for me. I was working on a question on, ratings versus rankings or pairwise comparisons. I was just looking at, what kind of surveys can you ask to elicit some sort of information. And one of the things we utilized was MIT's Place Pulse kind of platform, where they were just anyone goes onto the platform and you see these two images of street safety, and you're asked to say which of these looks safer. You just select that, and then you keep doing that. So you can see here, their goal is 500,000 clicks, right? And they've got in this page, and I've taken the photo, about 350,000 clicks. So they're crowdsourcing this data. Then what happens with this data? So notice that they haven't collected any other information. No other information is being collected. You go on the platform, you're shown these two pictures. Okay, they use that then to generate large-scale maps of urban safety. Like they'll take every image, because you have Google Street View, right? You can just plug in and say, okay, if this image in general was preferred, images like that will be preferred, and so then they're generating safety maps. Okay, so then they'll be like one particular street view, you can click on it and you'll be told this is 9.9/10 per street. Yeah.
This shot was taken only during.
Very good question. Yes, so these ones are taken during daytime. I have done some analysis when I'm going to present you that looks at night. Safety pin is actually doing data collection both at day and at night. There's a lot of interesting things going on here. First, who is providing the labels? And second, even the images, who's selecting the images, right? So what happens is, so one of the motivating things for me when I was doing this, I was doing it in Chicago. And you can imagine that mostly it's white dudes who's providing the labels. And what if you create this kind of an ecosystem, and then it feeds into something like a Google Maps, and they say, find me the safest route home. Are you systematically going to make people avoid certain routes because they actually have things which are not related to safety, but are actually talking about race, right? Which is in a city like Chicago is very important, right? Yeah.
So how digital is it for a bot to be this
time? No, it should not be digital at all. It's not digital at all.
If I'm a predator and I design a bot.
Exactly. It's not digital at all. So that's a whole set of ethical questions. I'm not even going there. Today's work for me is looking at just evaluating and just looking at one particular demographic difference and how, to what extent can that affect predictions.
Right. Respondents. So when they're responding to it, that data, there is nothing on the respondent. Right?
Usually there's nothing. Sometimes the age and the gender.
Nothing, no profiling of the respondent.
No. So it could be, so another thing is I could send in, and I'm sure this is what happened. Like this MIT students obviously are overrepresented in this data and their friends. And so that's the other problem, right? So that's exactly when I started doing, I got into this project just looking at, what is a better way to elicit information, ratings, rankings, pairwise comparison. But then I saw this and I got interested in who's generating the data, right? And so just to take it to the context of India, this is safety fin apps interface. And so this is, you can't see it too clearly, but basically they do a safety audit and let others know how safe a place is. And then you basically say, in this place, is there enough light, footpath, etc. They're asking these questions. And then there's one thing, are you feeling? And then you also you can also have an option of taking a picture and upload it. So this is on mobile phone, anyone can download it. Many women and men have. Okay, and then this, they are also using this to generate these safety maps, and they are speaking with urban policy. Okay, So my research questions, and I'm going to give you the answers here as well, for this particular project are, does the gender mix in crowdsourced data have a downstream predictive ability of machine learning models that are based on this data? The answer is yes. In particular, I find that there's limited use of crowdsourced data from men for predicting women's safety perception. Seems very obvious to an economist, but this stuff is happening, and that's why you need economists here looking at this stuff. Are there systematic gender differences observed in safety ratings data in the collection of safety ratings data? And yes, there are differences across a very set of factors, which I'm going to talk about. And then one thing which I really enjoyed doing was we actually got some qualitative attributes. We asked people to write out why they found the place to be safe or not, beyond just getting ratings. And then we did machine learning and text analysis on that data to see if men and women utilize different vocabularies when describing safety. Because even the concept of what is safety, that itself could be gender. And so the answer to this is well, yes, male and female use significantly different vocabularies. So these are the answers, these are the questions, and I'm going to show you how I got to this. I'll start with just a quick, very brief review of the relevant literature. So this is a paper which is a very nice paper, but it's based completely on the safety pin and safe city sort of data set. This is a paper by Igidr. She's at the World Bank, I think, and she's actually done a really nice structural econometric model where she's looked at women's educational choices being driven by safety. So there's like basically she's shown that women with sorry.
Oops. Yeah. Bolo. Karo?
Mute off.
Hey, what is this?
Okay, great. Some nice comic relief. So basically, Girija Bolkar in her work shows that women actually choose educational colleges that are lower ranked because they're closer to your houses or in a less unsafe area. And how does she measure safety? She uses the data from Safety Pin and Safe City. Now that seems very natural and seems really nice. Her paper is amazing. But the point is, she's used this data, and how reliable is this data, right? There is, of course, a range of literature that talks about how daily mobility of women in developing countries is guided by a set of complex hierarchies. We won't go into the details now, but there's a lot of literature, typically ethnographic, about women's mobility, right? There is work on eyes on the street. You know, why for women it's actually important to have people on the street. Just having eyes on the street makes a street safer. Actually, I should mention there's also this work by Seema Jayachandran who talks about how labor force participation rate can be related to mobility, women's mobility and safety. Right? Obviously, and then it's obvious when you think about it, but that's how important, crucial something like safety can be, right? Women may choose not to step out of the house because they're feeling unsafe, and then they're not engaging in economic activities, right? And of course, there is some literature on the gender digital divide. So then immediately you think about crowdsourced data and you look at ICT access. And we know that in India, for instance, women in the household are less likely to have ICT access than men. So all of these are like motivating things for motivating literature from the social sciences. I'll also talk about some motivating literature from computer science around this entire field that's developing called algorithmic bias. So it's called algorithmic accountability, fairness, and transparency literature. So this basically looks at these machine learning systems that are out in the wild, and to what extent do they have differential outcomes and outputs for different demographics. Okay, there's a whole range. Typically, it's actually very interesting. Raji et al. And Bolami and Kebru, these are women of color, and computer scientists, and they are the ones who've been doing much of this AI ethics work. Generally, the AI ethics community is actually dominated by women of color around the world. These people find that facial recognition technologies, these models do a much better job of predicting for men, white men, than for African Americans or women, right? So there is this literature. So this is a booming area of research, empirical research. On the other hand, there's also research that's going into crowdsourcing for public policy. This decentralization, democratization of opinion, right? And so they're saying, okay, let's start doing everything through ICTs, and public policy also gets fed from crowdsourced data, right? And so basically what's happening, these crowdsourced safety applications are in the same kind of domain, right? This and the set of papers I talked about, this is actually been done by economists and computer scientists. They're using crowdsourced data for neighborhood comparison. And it's really important to mention here that while there is now a burgeoning literature on the effects of machine learning and AI systems in society, that almost the entire literature is focused on the United States, with a little bit in Europe, almost no literature in India and other developing countries. Okay, and there's actually a few people who really talked about how important it is, especially because we don't have something like a GDPR, right? We don't have data protection laws, and what does it mean for this kind of large-scale data being collected and then being used for public policy? So my paper kind of tries to contribute there. Okay, with that, I'll go straight into the methodology of the paper. I was thinking when I was coming to the methodology bit, should I just do the entire methodology in one go and then give you all the results in one go? And I eventually decided against it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you just a basic methodology of how street views were selected and sampled, and how participants were selected and sampled. And then for each set of results, I'll first tell you the methods and then give you the results, and then methods, results, so that it's a little bit easier to understand. So this is the first time I'm doing it like this, but I think it will be useful, and yeah, maybe your thoughts on this later. So how did I do this exercise, right? When I want to study something like this, where do I even begin? So I basically need two things. I need street views and images which need to be rated, and I need respondents, right, who need to rate. So now I just basically have to figure out how to sample each. Right? So let's start with the images that I sampled. So first of all, I've got this map of Delhi. These are the places, these pins are the places from which I sampled data. And I'm going to talk to you about how these pins were selected. So what we did was we ranked all the districts of Delhi by district crime statistics. And especially we focused on districts that are happening outdoors, crimes that are happening outdoors. Right? So basically, then you get the idea of the two least safe, most safe, and the two least safe districts. Okay, fine. But a district is pretty large. So then what we did is we sent one of our research assistants to go to the police stations in this district and have like these informal conversations with people and say, okay, what are the safest neighborhoods here? What are the least safe neighborhoods here? And we got this informal information, right? So we made a list of safe neighborhoods and safest districts, safest neighborhoods and safest districts, unsafe neighborhoods and safe districts, and unsafe neighborhoods in unsafe districts, and safe neighborhoods in safe districts. So that's how we thought of our image matrix. And then the brief to the research assistant was to collect street views at street level like this. So you don't take an aerial shot and an underground shot, and you want to collect across a variety of built environment factors which have been important in the literature. So some of the literature I reviewed in the past, they actually have lists of things that matter to people, right? And all interviews were taken during the daytime to make sure that light is not the thing that we are looking at over here. And we chose 50 locations, so something like 13 to 14 in each of these: safe, unsafe, safe, etc. Right? And so these colors represent, like, so the green one is safe neighborhoods and safe districts. The yellow is unsafe neighborhoods in safe districts, orange is safe neighborhoods in unsafe districts, and red is unsafe neighborhoods in unsafe districts. So this is how we kind of we try to get as much of a variation in the images themselves that have to be labeled. So this is what we did. So this is 50. Yeah.
So you didn't have any pictures taken at night or no questions at night.
I'm coming to that.
Because your perception totally sometimes flips, right?
Absolutely. So that's you preempted my next point. For a subset of the images, I took the exact same image during daytime and after sunset. So there were 20 such additional locations. But this is the main survey, the 50 images, because the other thing is you're getting students. So you see next that I've got a sample of students. You're getting students to rate these things. You also have to trust their rating. So if you ask them too many images, then after some point in time, they might get really bored and just like do whatever they want. So we wanted to make sure we did some pilots to see that this is a nice number, like 50 to 80 was a nice number to get some reliable ratings. But yeah, you're right. We did look at night, and I'll show you some results from night time as well. So how did I collect participants? We recruited students from IIT Delhi. We sent an institute-wide email soliciting interested students. We got some 600, 700 students who were interested. Of these, we randomly selected 125 girls, female students, self-reported female, and 125 self-reported male. No one said non-binary or didn't prefer to answer. So we had 250 randomly set of students that we said that, okay, you are invited to take part in the survey. Out of this, finally, 106 females and 118 males took the survey and completed the survey. So my total data set is 224 students. So the final data set for the main exercise, separate from the day and night one, is a fully observed matrix of 224 students with 50 ratings for each of the images. I did collect other demographic information. That's part of a separate exercise that I'm not presenting here today, but I did collect a bunch of demographic points. So this totally adds up to 11,200 ratings. Honestly, this is not that big, but the number of ratings is quite, it's non-trivial. We also have the subsidiary data set of day and night comparisons. So that's 50 into 20. 224 into 20. And we also did for about 10 of these 50 images randomly, we asked people to also say, why did you choose this rating? Could you justify the attributes of what attributes would you suggest justify the rating that you give? So I'll show you what that looked like. This is what, if you were a student who took the survey, this is like a kind of a question that I'd ask you, right? You see this picture, and then you ask them, please rate how safe this street image appears to you, right? And you have these. This is just a Likert scale. Very simple question. We track their response times, right? For how long are they taking to answer each question? And of course, we track this their answers. And for a subset of questions, these images were at night. And for a subset of 10 questions after this scale, what are the attributes? That's what we did. So that's the data. So my first set of results is predictions using machine learning technology. This is the main result, but there are other interesting results that follow, but let's talk through this. So I use what is known as matrix factorization for missing value imputation. These are basically algorithms, machine learning algorithms that power recommendation systems like in Netflix. So when you're going and watching a movie on Netflix, you like something and you dislike something, and then based on that, they recommend something to you. They literally are doing, they don't have much more data. Yeah, maybe they know your location, they know maybe a little bit of your social network, but mostly what they know is you have watched this movie and liked it or disliked it, right? And so these algorithms are used ubiquitously, like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, everyone is using this, right? Very simple algorithm. The basic idea is to factorize a matrix into two lower dimensional submatrices that you multiply, right? Fun fact, I got interested in matrix factorization at Nigeria because of principal component analysis. Do you remember you had taught us principal component analysis? Some people in economics we use principal component analysis methods when there is maybe multicollinearity, right? Essentially, what is PCA doing? It's basically breaking up a larger matrix into smaller matrices, right? And here the only difference is, so you're taking one large matrix. So this would be like a let's say an n cross 4 over here. So but maybe let's say n cross 50, right? And then I break it into an n cross 3 into a 3 cross 50, right? So I'm breaking up a matrix with n into p rows into n into k and k into p, where k is strictly less than n and p, right? The big difference here is there are missing values. In PCA, we don't have missing values, right? In machine learning, what they've just done is that you basically solve this iteratively. You put in some values, then you get these lower dimensional matrices, you multiply them, and then you see how well you're predicting certain things. You pretend you can't see some things, and then see how well you're predicting until you reach some kind of a, iteratively, you reach a point where, okay, I'm okay with this level of error. And it's obviously very, very powerful. So basically, I'm just, again, another diagrammatic representation. You have this matrix with some missing values. You break it up into iteratively into these U and B matrices, and then you multiply them, and you get a new matrix, and it has these additional like predicted values, right? So that's all that's going on. So what did I do? So I did this. I have a matrix, a fully observed matrix. And so there should be no question marks. But I can, because I have that fully observed matrix, I can simulate situations where I am not seeing enough women's data and I'm not seeing enough men's data, right? And so I have a fully observed matrix. I simulate different proportions of missingness by gender. So I can say 10% of women's data is missing, 20% of women's data is missing, up to 90% of women's data is missing. Similarly for men. So I have these two axes of proportion of missing data, right? And then what I do for each of these kind of cases, I impute the missing values using matrix factor, standard matrix factorization algorithm, right? And then I compare the prediction accuracy, actually the prediction error by gender by using this what is known as mean squared error. Again, it's very simple, very intuitive. It's basically the y is the truth. I know this because I have a fully observed matrix. Y hat is the imputed value, and then I square it, add it up, and I square it and average it. And that's it. I'm just looking at the mean squared error of what I want of the data that I'm hiding, right? And so I'm going to show you the results. I hope this is the first time I'm presenting it, so I'm hoping people see what I see, and I'm not just imagining things. Let me quickly, the X and Y axes are not that clear, so let me, because it's very small font. So this is the proportion of female data observed, right? So if you're going from 0.1 to 0.9, and this on the Y axis is proportion of male data observed. As we go from red to blue, your mean squared error is decreasing. So red means highest mean squared error, and blue is lowest contour of mean squared error. Okay, so if you just look at this, if you could just turn your attention only to the first plot here, it looks like as you observe more male or female data, overall mean squared error, this seems very intuitive, right? As you observe more data from anyone, mean squared error improves. So you would expect that at that corner you have the lowest, and at this corner, when you're observing very little data, you have the highest mean squared error. But instead of forget the middle one, because it's more apparent in the rightmost plot, this is for just mean squared error for the female subsample, right? And here we see that the contours have almost become perpendicular, right? So what's happening is, as you're initially when you have not much data of anyone, you are doing poorly mean squared error. But when as you go on the right hand side, you see as I get more female data, my mean squared error decreases, again, as expected. But as I see more male data, mean squared error for females is not necessarily decreasing, right? Because these, so if I would think of this dark blue, region. This dark blue region is at 0.8, is at the lowest when you're observing a lot of female data. There are, for example, when you're observing a lot of male data, at best you're like, there are certain regions where you're doing well, but you're doing the best when you're observing most female data. Is that clear? So basically, why this one is masking what's going on there, right? So you're in general, as you get more data from any gender, you do better. But for women, you actually do the best when you observe more data from women. So especially if you look at the extreme dark blue, this is the lowest mean square error. This at this point, actually, I'm doing better at, like, say 90% data from women and 50% data from men than if I have like 80% data from men and 90% data from women, right? So this is something that's been, and actually it's not very apparent here, but even for men, there is some of that happening. So it's becoming a little bit more parallel to the x-axis over here, and here is getting a bit parallel to the y-axis, right? And so the overall idea here is that in general, observing more data leads to better predictions. However, for female predictions only, if I am interested in female predictions, observing more male data has limited utility, right? And vice versa for male predictions. So why this matters? Yeah.
So why if I observe the 100% of the female data, but I observe, say, around 40% of male, it's better compared to when I observe 100% of female and 100% of male?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think my sense of this, again, so basically it's an empirical study, so this is what it is. But my understanding of this is because I actually ran, there are different versions of this I ran. I'm not going to go into too much detail of it, but I think what's happening here is, if you have over representation of males in your data, that actually starts having a negative impact on the prediction for women. So having more male data makes my predictions for women worse. Beyond for a certain amount, it's good to have more male data because you are getting some idea of safety. But after a point, I think that's what my reading of this is, and I have some different versions of this, and I see some similar patterns in different versions of my simulation. I think what's basically happening is men are valuing different things than women, and so if you end up, initially it's fine. So to a certain extent, it's good to have more male data. It's good to have some more data anyway, right? But if you start having too many men compared to women, or if that ratio starts getting like maybe more men than women, you actually start hurting the predictions for women.
That's tough.
That's
quite tough. That is likely to happen.
Yes.
If the ratio is against the
right.
But if the ratio, if the population of women are having the are sharing the data, all women are sharing.
So this is not all. This is 90%. We go up to 90% because you need to 10% of the data you always have to have for a matrix factorization. You can't have any row which has zero. But yeah, I see what your point is. So what you're saying is, okay, if it's like 50% men and 50% women, till then it's fine. But if it becomes 60% men and 40% women, that's when the problem happens, right? But maybe something like that. So we don't know that 50% is that number. We don't know that maybe that men have there is some signal in their safety data which is very strong, and so even at like when 40% of the sample is male, it's happening. Also, I would say that this is proportions of females, so it's like 90% of 108, and that is 70% of 118. So it's possible that the actual numbers is also slightly different. But yeah, that's the natural question that came to my mind as well. And I think this is what's happening. And that's why what we did is next is actually contextualize these ratings. This is one bit, which is just like blindly just running the matrix factorization model and seeing what's going on. I think as economists, this is should not be a surprise to us. But I think it's important to communicate this kind of a result to the computer science community, etc. So let's see. So this is the main result. I then say, okay, I do have all this prediction data and I do have all this qualitative data. Let's see if we have something within those that can explain partly this result.
men
Yeah.
agree more on a photo or do women agree more?
Yes, we are going to no. So yeah, so we're going to see some of that. We're going to see some of that.
So the way I'm interpreting that figure is when you're trying to impute missing values for women, having an overrepresentation of women is not a good.
Exactly. So if you want, or having an overrepresentation of men is not helping. You're going out there and collecting that data, but that data is not useful. That data has very limited use. If I had to collect that data, I'd rather collect it for more women.
But it could also be because the implicit notion of safety that man remains responding to a bottomness of
Exactly.
and you're therefore now predicting the same thing.
Exactly. And so the thing is, we agree, we understand that. But when it comes to there are these whole machine learning systems that are built on this stuff, and they are not taking this into account. They are not taking this into account, right? So exactly that. And so what
There is no question which is asking the man, do you think this place is safe for women?
No, it's just they're not even asking gender. What is your gender? So in fact, I'll talk about this some more. Going forward next year, we're exactly looking at some of these questions. So one of the things that we did was we just did simple comparison of means for all ratings over all images by gender. Ratings over only images with significant gender. So I'll just show you what happens if you look at images that are so for every image, like your question, for every image I can run individual t-tests between genders, right? And see that is there a difference between men and women. And so I've done that, and I'll show you some of the results. And I've also looked at response times, right? And day versus night. What happens? So all of this is at day. Do these differences then get exacerbated at night? And then what does that mean for models that are built on this? By the way, Safety Pin, one of their major initiatives is collecting images at night and getting people to rate them, and they're not checking the gender. And so I'm going to show you these. So first is like all images. This is also interesting. If I look at just safety ratings by gender across all images, the two distributions seem to be completely identical. They are overlapping. Though if the t-test is significantly different, I think that's driven more by sample size. But they seem to be quite overlapping. So this could also be used by someone and saying, no, there is no differences. Look, men and women, their safety ratings overlap. But then what I did, I ran individual for each image, each of the 50 images, I ran comparison of mean t-test. I found that there are, I think, 11 or 12 images for which there is a significant gender difference. So about 38 images, there is no significant gender difference, but for 11 or 12 images, there is significant gender differences. And what I found very interesting there is that whenever there is a gender difference, women find the place less safe. Okay, so that's demonstrated here. So the red is the plot for women, and the blue is the plot for men. And you find that this is only for the images for which there is a gender difference, and you find that it's just like the male distribution is skewed to the right, and for women is skewed to the left. Left is less safe, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? I actually have, maybe if we have time at the end, I actually then looked at those images and actually see that are there certain visual characters of the images that I can identify, saying that, okay, this is here in these images, and it seems to be that women are finding this scary or less safe, right? And so I've done that as well. I haven't put this in the presentation for now. And I also did this, which is where I looked at the median response time for each. So I have how long everyone is taking to answer each question. So for a given respondent, a female respondent, I'll get your median response time. Similarly for male respondent, and I can plot this. And then I can also run comparison of means, not median speed tests. And here also we find that women are taking longer. So overall, this is a very simple analysis, but it tells you things. Overall ratings distributions appear to be completely overlapping, but if we consider only street views as significant gender differences, means female ratings are universally lower than male. And females also take significantly longer to answer each question. implying that there are more complex, potentially more complex mental calculations underlying their responses, right? So that's part of the quantitative comparison. And the second one is I do the same thing and then I just look at, okay, for this same set of images taken at night and taken during the day, if I ask men and women, how do their distributions look, right? Okay, I think I should be done. So this is male ratings. The light blue are the ratings during the day. I think this overlap is a little confusing, but basically the purplish one is the night and the light blue one is during the day, right? And if you take a look at the same thing for female, the dark red one is for night and the salmon one is during day, right? And again here you can see that at night, female distribution really dramatically shifts to the left. And so that means that my same analysis, if I was to do with the nighttime images, this would become even more exacerbated, right? Sorry.
Is there a difference in the movement to the left or the right?
That's also, so basically you can look at this in multiple ways, right? You can look at day, night, day male, day female. You can look at night male, night female, and then you can look at difference between day, night male and difference between day, night female. So I think this is a good question. I think in this particular case, in this particular study, the sample size is kind of small. So actually we did not find day minus night for males versus day minus night for females was not significantly different. But night males versus night females is a larger difference than is significantly different and a larger difference. I think this is driven by the fact that we didn't have enough power. Like I didn't have enough sample size. So when I'm doing this, I'm extending this project. That we're going to try to address this first. But yeah, great point that you noticed. Yeah. So there's a distribution. So no, I don't think it will be exactly the same. It won't.
That looks kind of, this looks more.
Yeah. I think that could be like some formatting thing from my side. I think from my perspective, the main thing to see is where are the peaks, right? So since
but then the frequency of the peaks would also matter.
Yeah. So
we thought it seems that the y-axis overlaps. I mean, if you plot these distributions of male and female of one graph.
Yeah, so I tried a bunch of those things. I think even there you can start. So for example, so let's do a mental exercise of the dark blue and the dark red overlapping. And then you would see that it is the case that the peaks of the red is higher than the peaks of the blue. So I had done that. I haven't presented it here, but you would see the pattern even if I was to plot the same thing on the same plot. So for instance, I could have plotted for day and night, male, female, and we would see what we are seeing here. So that men are just finding it less unsafe. Right. So all of that. So now let me come to my qualitative data. So I think this is also something that I'm very excited about, which is like,
we have a summary statistic which shows how the ratings map with that safe district, safe place.
Yeah. We did some of that.
Do people say unsafe districts?
Very good question. Yeah.
They find it safe just because of the photographs.
We actually did not. I think if we did this. I haven't got the result here, but I think if I recall correctly, it is the safe neighborhoods actually get reflected in the ratings, but the district doesn't matter so much. So for instance, a safe neighborhood in an unsafe district is likely to get a pretty decent rating, even though it's in an unsafe district. We had done this. Yeah.
So the picture had in the caption, did it mention which neighborhood picture was taken?
I mean, I have all of that data.
No, was the participants shown?
No, nothing. Participants are only shown the image.
Only.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you could have had some prejudice about the neighborhood.
Yeah. So perfect. So I actually did collect when we did the basic demographic information before the survey, the rating survey. We actually asked them how long have you been in Delhi. We actually got this information from participants. So I am doing there's an additional paper on this which actually does regression and more like standard econometrics, where I will control for familiarity. with Delhi. So how long have you been in Delhi? Have you only been here for 2 months, 10 years, etc. So so there could be that familiarity. Let me quickly come to this part, which I find very interesting, and I think, especially for students who are interested, there's this whole range of methods in text analysis which has come up, where basically you can create a matrix of words, right, after cleaning them. So there's a bit of cleaning which you do through Python, and so your rows are respondents, and the columns are all the words that people have used to describe something, right? And then when you can do that, you can do things like you can have simple frequency distribution. So you can see what are the most frequently elicited attributes for lowest and highest safety ratings. So I'm going to show you some of those. And so just to be qualitative, researchers do this when you have like 15 interviews, 30 interviews, and you sit down, code it individually, manually. But you can't do that when you have data which is much larger, like for example, IMDb ratings. And so in those cases, you do things like text analysis, which is essentially finding patterns within the reviews, right? So essentially, that's what I've done here. I found what are some common attributes that are coming up for males versus females, right? And then what I do is something known as a KL divergence study. So KL divergence looks at how similar two distributions are, how close two distributions are, right? I could look at the distribution of words and see, is a distribution of words from a random subset of women closer to the distribution of words from with a reference subset of women versus men. So this is with showing me, so the frequency distribution is kind of rudimentary, but it's powerful because you can see the words. KL distribution tells you this, KL divergence will tell you this kind of overall. So for example, what I do here is for each simulation, I randomly select 30 female respondents. Then I create two comparison groups, 30 randomly selected, another 30 randomly selected female respondents, and another 30 randomly selected male respondents. And then I can compare the KL divergence between the distributions of the both comparison groups with the reference group, right? And so I'm going to show you some of these results. So here is these are the top 10 words attributed by women and men for the least safe and the most safe. What images they said was least. We are not telling them this, right? They are giving 0. They are saying least safe, and these are the reasons. And men are, and then we just compare the number. So yeah. These are 10 images each response. So you have 2,240 of these, right? So 224 respondents. Each respondent got 10 random images, and we then subsetted with the images that they have said is 0, least safe, and images that they have said is most safe. And then we are seeing what are the words that they're using to describe them. What are the most common words that they're using to describe them? So, yeah. Yes. Yeah. So let me first give you the results and then describe them. So both genders employ different vocabularies, especially when describing the least safe images. So we'll talk about that. Females are preoccupied by seclusion, right? So if you see lack of people, deserted, isolated, lonely, secluded, this is just in the top 10. Right? For men, you see none of that till at the bottom you see lonely. Right? So when you're talking about least safe, women are just always thinking about, so this eyes on the street phenomenon we are seeing here. This is another important one. Walls is an important factor for females, okay? We see this even in, those just 11 images where I said that there are differences, walls seem to be important. So basically this obstruction that you can't get out of, right? Men don't mention wall. I mean, I think wall comes for men, I think it's rank 40 or 35 or something like that. So for women, it's like rank 3 or 4. For men, animal. There's a dog in a picture. That's what man considers to be unsafe, but we're thinking of very different things when we're talking about safety.
But women think it's safer.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. A female is not that scared of a dog. As she is of more people. Yeah, maybe. That's you. If it was, yeah, then, but we do actually see animal, dog or something like that in the least safe, but much lower down the order. So this is showing you that they're thinking of very different things, right? Men and women. Their vocabularies are much less gentle when you're thinking of what is safe. So people, everyone is talking about people. People are talking about all different from residential neighborhoods, right? Colony, locality, residential. Police seems to be quite important for men. For women, it's there, but for men, yeah, police. Maybe women, for them, it's not so clear that police are safe. So this is another. This is what you see just by looking at the raw data, and then this is yeah.
Numbers repeating on both sides.
Yeah.
So which one?
Vehicle.
Right. So yeah, you're right. So here you're very, very right. So for instance, actually, people is also actually repeated in both. So what then I did was actually did a sub search of every time the people came up, and for people, we saw that here every time over here it was absence of people, and over it was presence of people. Then I went and looked at the context. I did not do that for vehicles, but I can do that for vehicles. My sense is this, that parked vehicles is the problem for safety. So again, looking at those 11 pictures where there were differences, we saw lots of parked vehicles. We can imagine like parked trucks, scary. Moving car, not so scary.
But here you have not, the context is clearer here for something. When you say vehicle, there is not, parking is not used as one of the.
But here you see park.
And here is vehicle also.
Yeah, and this park over here, by the way, is like a garden park. So I think vehicle is fine too. I'll actually do that. I'll go back and again do that context specific thing. Because see, if you see, there's only 11 of them here, 11, and over there some 12. So I can go and just check exactly when it was and just see the context. But thanks for pointing that out. And then, just to show this, that this is not just the top 10 words. This is systematically women and men are using different vocabularies. So these are the KL divergences that I've plotted across 500 simulations. So this is like this is KL divergence with respect to the reference group. So your female comparison groups are always closer, not always, on average closer to the reference group of females than males. So this is a small result to kind of say that the previous result is not just it's a little bit more general. Okay, I just have a couple more slides to wrap up. So a quick summary of my results. If I have time, do I have time for a quick summary or should I? Okay, right. So the main, the way I would like to think of this is that first of all, it's important to control for demographics even within matrix factorization systems, as to the extent possible. Right? Large volumes of data from males does not help predict better for females. Again, saying this to a group of economists is like preaching to the choir, but I hope to speak this to people in the policy sphere, to computer scientists, and I know, for instance, in IIT Delhi, there are folk who are helping with these kind of projects, and I think it's important to speak to them. All our prediction differences have been contextualized by studying the ratings and attributes, and we see that females likely use different mental models for safety and the associated vocabularies to assess safety. So those are the main summary results of summary of my results. The contribution, according to me, is that A, I'm adding to literature on algorithmic bias and safety perceptions. I think this is important because in the US, this is being used a lot. And I think in the US, maybe the most common factor will be race, which is what I felt when I was there. But I think not, I have maybe seen one paper that somewhat touches on crowdsourcing bias for safety, but it's becoming a very important, yeah.
But why your body is algorithmic bias? Is the bias in the algorithm, or is the bias in the picture, in the main and the
Yeah, so great question. So basically, generally the algorithmic bias literature says that there are different sources of algorithmic bias. So one of the sources of algorithmic bias is the training bias in the training data that's subsumed under algorithmic bias. Then there's a bias in the model, and then there's a bias in what you use the outcomes for. right? So this is, I'm just following convention. I would say within algorithmic bias, I would call this labeling bias or even example bias. What image gets labeled is called an example. That's it's called in machine learning terms. For us, it's an observation, but for them is example. That example which is being labeled. So I could call it as labeling and example bias underlying algorithmic bias. But yeah, the broader term in the literature is algorithmic bias. Then I'm also adding to the literature on global south, in particular India, on AI system bias. Very little work has been done empirically. And I feel that this is just like one first step towards that. Policy implications, of course, crowdsourcing should be limited to a group of interest if you are able to. And if not, then you please predict for specific subgroups if you are able to, or apply appropriate weights. And these are something that as economists, this is like so easy for us to say, right? Apply appropriate weights, right? But people are not doing that. I also want to make a quick note here that this study is a first step beyond the specific context, because it could be caste, it could be class, it could be race, right? I've just looked at gender, but the same issues could come up in for different contexts. And citizen engagement, participatory public policy. Lots of people are talking about these have become buzzwords, but this could actually have implications there as well, right? Who are you getting the information from? And going forward, I just have these just 3 quick points. I am now, the next step of this study is I actually did collect some more information on like showing people a particular image and saying, if walking through this area, would you take a shortcut through this area if it reduced my walking time by 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes? No, I would never take the shortcut, right? So then I'm actually looking at, okay, one thing is safety. The second thing is, to what extent does it actually affect your mobility choices, right? And so I'm going to do some of that. I've got a project that's going on where I'm looking at class. So I'm looking at women from different economic classes and seeing how this affects. And I'm also using again qualitative methods. There's something known as participatory photo mapping and things like that, where I'm trying to understand from women living in bastis and going to them and speaking to them about these kind of applications and whether they find it useful, whether they do not. One of the interesting things that has come up, which is I think counterintuitive, is a lot of people from lower income neighborhoods actually they conflate, or their definition of safety is similar to surveillance. They say, oh, that place is safe because there are so many CCTV cameras. So that's very interesting, and that's something that's come up already in the second research I'm doing. And then I just want to make a quick note here, which I started off with, is that this is not an econometrics paper. It's a little bit of applying machine learning methods, but overall, I would put this in a computational social science domain. And I wanted to just again, especially for the students here, say that the kind of training you get at a place like IGIDR, and as an economist and an econometrician, this entire new domain of computational social science has come up. And if you are especially if you're a serious econometrician, there are really great opportunities in that domain that's coming up. And I also want to say that this is also part of a larger effort on my research agenda, which is I'm looking at empirical gender studies. And I'm doing a range of studies on econometrically seeing differences between genders, and so happy to talk about it if anyone is interested. And thank you. Questions? Yeah, hi.
First, not question. Would you be interested in having a series of workshops on students and computational social science?
Right.
The second thing that your main result, you are not hitting it where it matters.
Yeah, please tell me how to.
We are talking about contribution and policy.
Yeah.
This is very not only for when you use apps for this, but even otherwise also, policy is silent on gender. So very simple statistical generality, because males grow up with males and females grow up with males. So that policy is missing. So you are also contributing there, not just here. So I would
Thank
say
you.
that you
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
not only your contribution in policy, because that is your main result. So yeah, I would like to see how Delhi vis-a-vis Mumbai, maybe do a collaborative work and how this pans out.
Right. So yeah,
So like, for example, if you recall when we were back here, this road in front of Igidr was not a safe road. But today perhaps it's a safe road because we have a lot of mobility, particularly night-time mobility. But keeping that aside, we would like to see that you have larger interaction back in Nigeria and maybe you can begin with a series of workshops on computer science.
No, absolutely. So just to give you, I have actually developed a bit of a module that I've given at Azim Fields University, IIT Kanpur, IIT Delhi, U Chicago on like machine learning versus econometrics, right? Where I basically it's a 3-hour workshop where I introduce people to the basics of machine learning, basics of supervised versus unsupervised machine learning. And I'm happy to do that. I mean, we can coordinate, and I'm happy to do. I have basically prepared a workshop preparation is there, so which I can, and I so I have code for it and things like that, so that I can do. I just need to coordinate the time. So yes, the second thing on thank you so much. I think you are right. This whole question of gender in policy, in public policy. Yeah, it's very important. Actually, I have a PhD student who is an IAS officer, and she is doing her PhD on basically the gender perspective in public policy. So I am looking at that, and so I need to connect that. Yeah, this work is under that larger thing. So I'll definitely. That's a very good point. So thank you so much. And the Mumbai thing. Sorry, yeah.
Mumbai thing, maybe there is a group of people may not be related on machine learning, but related work with this gender group is the Lakshmi Lingam, and this group. They have done some work.
Right.
So you may like to touch base.
No, perfectly. Actually, Safe City. So I've actually spoken. In fact, like I know I've been kind of Safety Pin is doing this, Safety Pin is Safe City is doing this, but I've actually spoken with them, the co-founders, and Safe City is actually based out of Bombay. And we've been talking to them, and actually, okay, fine. Some of them actually are aware of potential biases, and some of them are not really thinking about it, but they are. I see what they are also trying to do. There is no data on safety, and so they're helping generate that data. However, whatever the means, right? So actually, this whole idea is to make it a little bit. I do want to actually, at the end of it, actually have a workshop with policymakers, platform founders. And academics to talk about this basically urban planning, female-centric urban planning and mobility, and bring out the fact that be careful of when you start saying I just use ICT, everything for everyone, right? So you're like a policy for all is actually policy for people with ICTs, right? And so just want to bring that up, and so I am basically looking beyond it.
Along that line, this is policy for people size. But the way you're putting the question, I don't know. Are your respondents are all? They are all students of IIT.
Yes.
They're all English.
Yes.
But what if you were to get people who are non-English?
Yes.
It's
I'm exactly doing that now. Basically, this was basically a pilot study. And then based on the results that we got here, we applied for a grant, and we got a grant to look at this so we are now developing similar questionnaire we're going to do a representative survey of women residing in bastis in Delhi and compare it. Then it becomes, then I'm looking at the class angles.
No, but class angle is fine. The basti part is fine. There you might find some differences in the notion of safety. But I'm talking of people who are English speaking versus non-English.
Yes.
Even if they are of higher class, you find a difference.
Yeah, I guess somewhere I need to choose what. So, and I think I haven't thought of that particular So in a way, I'm going to do a little bit of that because I am going to have this survey in Hindi versus. So it's going to be Hindi versus English. Maybe we might see some results. But I mean, I have to choose, right? Like I said, there are so many axes on which you can split. But I need to get also enough people in each group so that my results are significant. If there is, signal in the data. Yes.
One question and one suggestion. The question is, will you define safety to respondents?
No.
Because the perception can be very different. Second thing is, since you have a captive student audience there,
Yes.
take the same mails and ask them if they would go to find these features safe or not safe. If they were traveling with the female company, you will find the response quite different.
Right. So that's a very good point. So this is part of a larger research agenda. So one of the things I'm looking at when I said empirical gender studies, one of the things we're looking at IIT Delhi as a lab, and we're looking at the female pipeline of engineers in IIT Delhi, and we're looking at their entry, we're looking at their experiences, their retention, and their leadership. Right, and so part of that experience study, we are actually doing this, where we are actually going to map out what women think of the campus and what men think of the campus, and then make one of the things we might do. I'll take this suggestion back, is make men and women walk together and see are there differences. But yeah, I am thinking of these questions. I can't do it. It's actually, they're not captive. They don't answer only. The students don't answer my. In this case, I found it interesting, so I got a decent number. But they're not that captive. But yeah, but for the campus study, I think we actually plan to do something like this. What are
perception of a male going to a place?
Yeah.
Alone. And with female coming and asking it.
Yeah, so we are going to do that for our campus, and we actually going to maybe look at around neighborhoods around the campus. So yeah, we're doing that. Thank you.
The safety, how safe I feel, perception.
Yes.
Differ quietly from the activity.
Right. Right.
Perception regarding safety may be somewhat related to by trust.
Yes. Yes.
So essentially the ground is the same, but one person may feel unsafe.
Yes,
while
yes,
another person may
yes,
feel safe
yes.
because another person is
Yes.
actually having higher developed like
Yes.
faster.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So these kind of biases, do you think that it would be a good idea to really go for say larger scale hospital surveys, and whether their perceptions are also correct?
Yeah.
And whether that has implications for safety perceptions or not.
No, so I think that's the thing. Safety itself is so nebulous, right? Is it safety from a traffic accident? Is it safety from a harassment? Yeah, so it is a nebulous concept. So I completely agree with you. And I think the reason I got interested in this is because I see that it is not a concept that can be easily measured. And that's exactly why I got interested in this question in the first place, right? But I see the value of something like this because we don't have any, how can you even measure whether a particular spot is safe or not? What we are planning to do actually now as the next step is running regressions with annotations for each of these 50 images and seeing, people are saying all kinds of things, but what are the things that are actually showing up as important predictors of safety? And in fact, safety pin is also, if I'm not mistaken, thinking of doing that. So they've got these like footpath present, is light, they've got these like 8 parameters, right? If you are able to predict those 8 parameters, maybe you're able to get which is a little bit more objective than the subjective thing of I am feeling safe. So
Nandana, I
yeah.
have this question that you had brought these pins and
Yes, yes.
taking pictures.
Yeah.
And you started this talk with saying that people visited the police station,
Yeah.
this crime,
Right.
data,
Yeah.
whatever it is. So is it possible to sort of match, the men and the women have said, okay, this is safe neighborhood, this is not, and then go back to the actual data and just see whether it's which one is closer, the women's perception is closer to the actual data or the men's perception?
Yeah, that's great. I haven't thought of it, and yeah, we could do that.
Actually, it's reported crime, I understand. Still, what the cops would think is safe or unsafe, and what the women Can that be validated? It's a small thing, but can it be validated?
I think that's a great point. I think that's a great point, and that again brings me back to why I think it's so important to do interdisciplinary work, because I think as economists, oftentimes we just are used to getting the data and running something and we're finishing it off. But I have noticed that the qualitative folk that I have on my team, including ethnographers, they have this kind of a thought process. They are interested in going back, validating, closing the loop on things. And I would totally consider doing that. I don't know if I can do it for this particular one. I do have the pin, so I could possibly do it.
We
Yes.
have a police station and all.
Right. No, absolutely. And then in the current study, I can definitely do it. In the current study, I'm also looking at, imagine like right next to each other, there is a basti and a high-rise apartment, which is totally there in Delhi. Delhi is full of gated communities, right? And which are serviced by bastis. So what does that do? What does the gate do? Is safety more important or exclusion more important when you're moving around? And so we are going to do some kind of validations of this nature as well, taking photos from both neighborhoods just right next to each other, right? And then getting people to give their ratings, and then we'll go back. So we do plan to do
Question is
that.
also, are the two basti and the gated community,
Yeah,
are they in the same frame, photo frame?
Exactly.
Or are they in different shots?
yes, exactly. So we are thinking, that's exactly the kind of things that we're thinking of now, because in the new study, we are being even more careful about image selection.
Yeah, because when you said it's great image,
Yeah.
I was just thinking if there is camera,
Right.
it may not be captured.
Yes.
Right? And
Yes.
none of them actually in the words that you had spelled
Yeah.
out, there is no CCTV
No,
camera.
there was no, we didn't have a CCTV. We didn't, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think it was this level. So all
Yeah.
the CCTV cameras
Yes,
must
yes,
be
yes.
hanging up
Yes,
there.
especially now that we know that surveillance is considered as safety.
Most cameras don't work by that.
But it's just it's there, a dummy camera. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, let's talk about like selection of parameters for like the safety stuff. So once we have like say 8 parameters which we decide whether it's classified as safe, does the researchers bias towards a certain parameter effect?
No, great question. So as of now, the way we did it is that we don't have any parameters. And so that's a very good question actually, because what we wanted to do is let that study got them to annotate. So based on the attributes that they provide, that tells me, okay, these are some of the parameters. In fact, we found certain parameters that safety pin is not considering, but we found that they are important. And that's because we didn't do we of course read the literature and things like that. But and there will always be some, according to me, there will always be some sort of researcher bias. Like when I say built environment, when I'm saying safe, unsafe, like somewhere I'm doing a design choice. So some of my bias will probably creep in. But I'm trying my best to not say that these are the things that make you feel safe or not safe. I'm getting that from the attributes that are supplied by the respondents, right? I'm taking those top 20 attributes. Many of them are not there in safety pin or safe cities calculations, right? And then as a future exercise I'm going to do is I'm actually looking at those top 20 parameters. I'm going to annotate each image as having or not having that attribute. And then I'm going to see what is the actual relative weightage given to that attribute when someone is saying that some place is safe or not safe. And so then from there, I might find certain attributes that are significantly associated with safety.
So after a certain point of time, you like sort of cross-verify the validation test if you want. Like how do you write a truer picture of the actual weights that should be assigned?
That's what we hope to do. Yeah, that's what we hope to do. Yes.
So, talk about the DN9 comparison.
Yeah.
So I think the results are there, but is there a steady kind of a thing like from 3 you want to 2 and then 2 1, or is it that somewhere in the middle is constant from the experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think so again, a lot of these things have come to our minds also after we've done this pilot. So this is basically a pilot study that we did. So in the next time when we're doing this, we have a much larger sample that we are aiming for. And now what we want to do is that we actually want to show everyone. First, we'll do the whole data collection on like daytime images. And then we're going to show every respondent 10 or 20 nighttime images of the same places that they've given us daytime ratings of. Right now, here I didn't do that. Here I basically had 50 and then 20 separate. So now what I want to do is like I'm going to have per respondent their safety score for the daytime versus the nighttime. I will do it in a smart in a way that they don't get influenced, but I can do it because I have enough images, I think, that they will not recognize that this is already seen this place. But then I'll actually get within respondent change in safety for a particular location during day and night. And that will give me a much larger and richer data set to actually do this, and I can make a comparison like this. If you are rated it at 3, at night, are you rating it at 1, or are you still rating it at about 2, right? Or is it like if you rated 2 in the morning and during daytime and it continues to be 2 at night? I could see some things like that. I haven't, not with this data, I couldn't do that, but I have that in mind for the future. Yeah.
Would it matter if there was continuously like a slight kind of thing?
Great question. Okay, so interestingly, this entire genesis of the research is from one of my papers where I looked at ratings, rankings, and pairwise comparisons, and I basically did an empirical comparison of the predictive ability of these questions. If I just give you a binary scale, if I give you a 5-point scale, if I give you a pairwise comparison, or I give you a slider, turns out sliders are the best at prediction. Naturally, right? Because has the greatest, but also sliders take the longest amount of time, right? Turns out that 2 is actually binary is not very good. So in fact, in that paper, we had said that Netflix should not have moved to a 2-point. They moved from a 5-star to a thumbs up and thumbs down. And then I recently saw that Netflix has gone to 3. So they probably did some internal experiments as well. So basically, what we found was that in order to predict personalized, a binary is not very good. So, and a continuous scale is the best, but continuous scale takes much longer. And some 5 is something that's in the middle. And so that actually, the original research that I was doing was on pairwise comparison. And one of the things you were making people compare was street views. And that's where the genesis of this came. But yeah, great question. Any other?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Within the students, the images are from all over Delhi. Very good. Yeah. So I think I've kind of alluded to this before. So I specifically wanted only a very homogeneous set of individuals in my data set, where the only, like, the major attribute that is different is their gender. So I specifically wanted something homogeneous because here I'm looking at gender. But like you said, I also, obviously, students at IIT Delhi is a very elite crowd. And so that's why my current research is mostly focused on women living in Basti areas. But none of the images are from within the campus, and this is all done online. So, yeah. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Benchmark parameters. Right. Right, that's exactly what we hope to do. We basically want to find the attributes that are most significantly associated with safety, and we are basically doing it from a bottom-up manner, right? Because we are getting people to say things, then we are, based on what people have said, we are annotating images based on what people have said, then we will run regressions and see which of these attributes are significantly associated with safety, and then we will take this to the plans. That is the plan. Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Bharti.
I hope that once you are done with the larger part of the study,
Yeah.
come again.
Yeah, I have other things also to present. hopefully I'll have any other stuff.
I think we should end the Zoom meeting also. Can I stop share or?
Yeah, stop share and then you leave. Yeah.